Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Transit Towards Cleaner Heat. We are still building our room, so I will invite you all to get your coffee, to freshen up your thinking cap, so to speak. We'll just spend a few more minutes waiting for people to join us, and then we'll get going. Perhaps in the meantime, while we're waiting for some more folks to jump on, I'll just address a few housekeeping matters. We do have the chat function enabled in this webinar. I'll ask everyone that's coming to introduce themselves through that chat function. Maybe let us know where you're dialing in from, what part of the value chain that you come from. We'll ask everyone, of course, to keep these comments short and respectful. We also have a Q&A function, which I encourage folks to pop your questions in throughout the presentation. We're going to do our best to address these questions during the Q&A. I'll also flag, of course, that the webinar is being recorded. It will be posted to the Transition Accelerator, or pardon me, to the Calgary Hydrogen Hub website, and that is calgaryhydrogen.ca. That'll be available next week. While we wait for everyone to arrive, I'll just let you know that we will also be announcing our upcoming events on our LinkedIn page for next year and through our mailing list. So certainly let's make sure you don't miss things. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and to sign up to our mailing list if you haven't already done so. That again is at www.calgaryhydrogen.ca. We're about 12:02 now. I'm going to let things sit and soak for just a few more minutes. We'll probably get running here around 12:05. I'm seeing 73 participants so far, and we do have a good number who signed up initially. So let's just let it sit for a few more minutes so I don't have to go back and introduce myself multiple times. All right, just be patient. Grab that coffee. Put on your thinking cap. I think we're going to have a really interesting session here today. It's great to see our panelists with us today, of course, who are coming from us from across North America. Some are in warmer places, some are in wetter and grayer places. I will say I'm here in the sunny suburb of Sherwood Park, Alberta, which is just east of Edmonton. And it's a pretty average kind of day, looking a little cold and a little bit foggy, but certainly looking very festive as well. I'm seeing lots of folks here from the city of Calgary. That's great to see Calgary well represented. Some people from new companies that I'm not familiar with. So I would say, Zach, that we've been able to get some new people in, and that's great to see interest across the value chain. And I see someone from Tunisia. Oh my goodness, how exciting is that? Folks from post-secondary, David from City of Edmonton, David Hales, nice to see that you're on the line, David. Of course, the lovely and talented Mark Lee Wilson, who we go way back with Mark. Between him and I would say we know where all the bodies are buried. All the bodies are buried on this value chain. All right, I think we're going to get started. I do want to respect everyone's time. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Barbra Korol. I'm pleased to be moderating this session today on behalf of both the Calgary and the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hubs. I'm someone that you may have met in previous roles. I've been in the hydrogen ecosystem and the natural gas value chain for a very, very long time, about 25 years. And until recently, I was an executive director at Alberta Energy and Minerals, where I led strategic natural gas policy. And that, of course, includes hydrogen for about 15 years. I left the public service last year, August 2024, to set up my own consulting company called Peitho Group. And that's why I am here today. So today we're going to focus on one aspect of hydrogen policy. That, of course, is blending policy. We're going to highlight Bill 52, which is the Energy and Utilities Statutes Amendment Act, and the future of hydrogen blending in Alberta's natural gas system. We have roughly 75 minutes today, and I'm looking forward to a really great conversation. Now, Bill 52, of course, is a pivotal moment in Alberta's energy transition. It opens the door to hydrogen blending, but only once supporting regulations are in place. And that's an important thing to remember, that that bill has passed third reading, but it has not been promulgated. The enabling regulation is going to clarify a lot of remaining policy questions. So that means today our conversation is not just about what the legislation says, but also what it must do to truly enable hydrogen blending that is safe, equitable, economically viable, and environmentally responsible. Now, we've a diverse panel of experts here today from across the provincial, national, and international hydrogen ecosystem. Each brings a unique perspective on the opportunities and challenges ahead. As a moderator, my goal, of course, is to guide a conversation that's generative, respectful, forward-looking. We're going to explore key questions such as what must Bill 52 regulation address to make hydrogen blending a reality? How do we balance innovation with affordability and safety? Really important questions. And how can Alberta lead in hydrogen development in a way that maximizes our inherent advantages in this value chain? So I will invite our panelists to speak candidly, and I'll encourage our audience to engage thoughtfully. But before we do, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. Next slide, please. I want to acknowledge that we gather on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge the enduring relationship Indigenous peoples have with this land and the importance of including their voice in energy policy and environmental stewardship. This land has been a meeting place, a gathering place, and a traveling route for generations. We recognize the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge of the Indigenous peoples who continue to care for this land. We're grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and learn on this territory, and we commit to honoring the spirit and the intent of Treaty 6, which was signed in 1876 as a promise of mutual respect and partnership. Next slide, please. So our agenda today is quite tight. Our sponsors have graciously allowed us to extend this webinar by 15 minutes. To do so, though, we're going to have to crack along so we have sufficient space for your questions. I'll first frame out the key policy context, which will be certainly elaborated on in more detail by our panelists during their opening comments. We're then going to have a wee kind of a fireside chat with panelists when I'm going to invite our panelists to unpack some of the crunchier aspects of the core policies brought forward to date by the Government of Alberta. And then we're going to open things up to you, our webinar audience. I'm going to encourage you to make good use, of course, as I've said, of the Q&A function, as this is where we will be pulling audience questions from. Next slide, please. I have a little bit of a mouthful here on this one. I'm going to apologize, but I do think that it's important that we provide that policy foundation because it does ground our panel discussion. So bear with me. I've probably got about 7 or 8 minutes of comments to share with you before we get into the more important people who are our panel members themselves. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to 2020. When Alberta introduced the natural gas vision and strategy. So this is a plan I was very pleased and honored to be involved with. It recognized hydrogen as one of 5 key markets for Alberta's natural gas. It was brought forward at a time when things were certainly changing in the natural gas system. Producers and the downstream sector was looking very much to learn what Alberta saw as a bright future for these tremendous resources. Fundamentally, it was seen as a value-added opportunity to use natural gas in new and novel ways. At a time, I would flag when Alberta was losing market share in Eastern Canada and the Eastern US. It set ambitious goals. Specific to hydrogen, the goal was that we would see large-scale hydrogen production using carbon capture by 2030, and that hydrogen would be integrated into heating, transportation, and electricity generation, as well as being positioned globally as a leader in hydrogen exports by 2040. So you saw that kind of roughly 10-year commitment to integrate hydrogen into that domestic market and then really look to uncrack that export market by 2024. I would say the vision and strategy really was intended to articulate that bold future for Alberta's natural gas resources and to position natural gas as a feedstock for these future markets. And that included liquefied natural gas and a dramatically expanded petrochemical sector as well. So then next came the hydrogen roadmap in 2021. The roadmap really was intended to turn this broad vision and strategy into action. This was supposed to be how it was that Alberta would operationalize this policy intent. Now, it identified several policy pillars, including building out new market demand, enabling CCUS at scale, de-risking investment, activating technology and innovation, ensuring regulatory efficiency, leading the way and building alliances. Certainly, pursuing hydrogen exports were all central to achieving this 2030 to 2040 ambition. It really detailed how clean hydrogen would be deployed into domestic markets and end-use markets by 2030, and most importantly for us today, that residential and commercial heat market. I would say, interesting to us certainly, and me as a former policy person, the roadmap identified two future ambitions, one level being an incremental future and the other being a transformative future. Specific to the blending market, it identified in its incremental scenario the importance of pilot projects to testing out hydrogen blends of up to 5%, again, in that low pressure distribution infrastructure. Its more transformative future saw hydrogen blended at 15% by volume and pure hydrogen networks and communities being demonstrated to 200,000 residents. Obviously, that was an ambitious goal and could not be achieved, quite frankly, before those critical barriers, legislative barriers, were removed, specifically amending the Gas Utilities Act and the Gas Distribution Act. Tough to do anything without those amendments in place for sure. Then the government certainly took a number of years to unravel many of the specific policy actions that were included in the hydrogen roadmap, including establishing hubs, setting up a clean hydrogen center of excellence. But those next 3 years really were taken to take these actions and basically to make them so. In 2025, a big movement was achieved with the introduction of Bill 52, the Energy and Statutes Amendment Act. This is a critical piece in establishing and enabling regulatory framework. And I would highlight that although it's received third reading, it's yet to be promulgated and does not come into force until the Bill 52 regulation is done and approved by Cabinet. Once enacted, Bill 52 will allow for the introduction of hydrogen blending into natural gas networks by amending those two critical statutes that I mentioned before, the Utilities Act and the Distribution Act. It also, though, introduces some very new concepts such as customer consent to receive blended gas. Also important, Bill 52 does not identify maximum blending threshold limits. It confers new regulation making authority on the Minister of Affordability and Utilities. And that's really all I'll say at this point on Bill 52, because our panel obviously is going to dig quite deeply into this legislation. Last thing I'm going to flag is Bill 8, which was introduced last week into the Alberta legislature to address several cost recovery issues related to hydrogen blending projects that were launched prior to February 25th, 2025. Recall, if you will, that advancing pilot projects was identified in the hydrogen roadmap as pilots were intended to test hydrogen blending safety and the fundamental economics associated with those blends. Those pilots were also seen as critical to advancing critical engineering knowledge and other issues. So it's important to note as well that Bill 8 is still in the legislative process. It must pass second and third reading before becoming law. So this is the policy context that will inform our panel discussion. Taken together, really what's clear is hydrogen policy continues to evolve and to progress, but it's not without complexity. As we know, this is a complex and challenging value chain, and that's why we brought together this panel to explore these opportunities, the challenges, and what success might look like. So enough from me. Now let's hear from our panelists. Each is going to provide some opening comments. They'll share some perspectives on current blending policy, frame out what they see as some pressing issues or opportunities in the path towards achieving that blending market opportunity here in Alberta. So we're going to go to the next slide, please, if we could. And I'm going to introduce our first panelist, who is the lovely and talented Greg Caldwell. Greg is Director of Government Relations and Corporate Affairs for ATCO. He supports strategic initiatives in low emissions technology such as hydrogen and renewable gas, while acknowledging the critical and continued role of conventional energy infrastructure will have in sustaining the unprecedented standard of living that is enabled, quite frankly, by our abundant, reliable, and affordable energy. His approach emphasizes balancing forward-thinking innovations with the practical reality that robust energy systems are foundational to national security, to healthcare, to education, manufacturing, and agriculture. So thank you, Greg, and thanks to ATCO, I would say, for early leadership of this nascent value chain. Greg, over to you.
Thanks, Barb. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. If we can just go to the next slide. So I thought I'd start just by taking a broader view of where Alberta fits within the Canadian context. I think it's important to point out that every province you see on here where there's some color has some version of hydrogen blending or hydrogen enablement in legislation. The province that is probably the furthest ahead actually is Nova Scotia. They've done some really interesting stuff, and you wouldn't think Nova Scotia would be a leader, but I'll give some credit to their government and the people creating policy there. They've really over the past few years, not just in hydrogen but in all things energy, tried to take control of their destiny, and so if you hear their premier talk, Tim Houston, he uses the energy superpower stuff, and they view hydrogen as a part of that. So, Nova Scotia, I would say, is ahead of Alberta at this point. And then in Quebec, it's a lot more focused around renewable gas. So we won't touch on Quebec too much. However, there are some hydrogen programs proposed for Quebec. The biggest constraint in Quebec, there's no CCS in Quebec. I mean, let's be honest, natural gas is not an overly popular topic there. So the view there is everything should be done through electrolysis, and Hydro-Quebec has a shortage of electricity. So I think hydrogen is going to be quite challenging there for projects like what we're talking about here. And then you have Ontario, BC, Alberta. I will let Fortis talk about BC. I won't touch it at all. They know more than I do. But Ontario they actually had the first blending project in Canada. That project has been, it's now part of their rate base. It's in rates. They continue to operate it. And then we'll get to Alberta here shortly. So we can go to the next slide, please. Barb mentioned it in her opening comments, but I did want to talk about how we got here and where we thought we would get at certain dates. So the roadmap was published, I believe it was late in 2021. And it gave these sort of target dates for supporting blending and supporting pure hydrogen communities. And you see in the near term, it talked about amendments to the Gas Utility Act, Gas Distribution Act. We had identified prior to 2021 there were some real challenges to doing hydrogen blending the way the Gas Utility Act existed. And the key ones were just to highlight for folks that don't know the definition of gas. Just it didn't include hydrogen, which I will say is unique to Alberta. Almost everywhere else, hydrogen was in the definition of gas. And it's strange because we've always delivered hydrogen in our gas streams. Some people don't understand that. And so we were delivering a product that technically wasn't in the definition of what we were delivering. I think the intent was to clean that up as well as, and we'll get into cost recovery. Ultimately, if you're building new infrastructure and you're adding to the rate base and obviously to the cost customers pay, like how is that to be addressed? So that was the intent of those changes, I believe. And then also to look at, long term, how do you advance pure hydrogen communities? And I will I'll jump ahead a little bit. Maybe if we just go to the next slide and I'll talk about just the pure hydrogen stuff because this is my last slide and I think I only get 5 minutes and I'm probably close to my time. But what Bill 52 does and doesn't do, it talks about hydrogen blending all over the bill. It does not talk about pure hydrogen. And so whether it's building a pure hydrogen transmission line or a pure hydrogen distribution line, the bill does not enable that. And I think it's important folks understand that. And those that have worked in this space know to get to hydrogen blending, you need pure hydrogen first. You need a pure hydrogen line or production, which also this bill does not enable us to own production, and nor do utilities want to own production in Alberta. That's a long-standing thing that whether it's electric or gas, that's a separate business. So that is just something I want to point out that for folks that are when they're reading this, that they understand that anything to do with pure hydrogen is not enabled in the bill unless it would be allowed through a pilot. So I'll just quickly go through the points. The bill does allow hydrogen blending into the natural gas distribution system. Like Barb said, we can assume that means 5% today. That's what the CSA has come out and said is allowable. Anything above that, I'm going to speak for the government and say they probably wouldn't be comfortable with that today until there's clarity from the CSA on that topic. That's something our team continues to work on and as well as with the CSA directly and the partners there on those committees. It doesn't introduce some cost recovery mechanisms. I won't get into that. However, it is very specific and who pays. And basically it says, if you get it, you pay. And it also requires prior consent from customers. This is also, again, a unique thing about this. We do not, we deliver many different qualities of gas across Alberta. We don't ask for consent from customers today, depending on the quality of gas you get, for example. And when I say quality, there are different hydrogen amounts, even in the gas that goes to your home, depending on where you live. That's unique. And gas utilities that want to do this must receive as well prior approval from the AUC before moving forward. So it's not like you could just go do this and then after the fact go to the commission and say, oh, we did this. What were these costs prudent and all that? Yeah, you would have to get prior approval from the commission and because the regs aren't written, we don't know exactly how that would work around consent or even the prior approval from the commission. So I'll just leave it there. And then finally, there is some regulation making authority in there around pilot projects. I mean, the only thing that exists today are pilot projects just in our space specifically. So that's the final piece of the bill that I think is important. So I've tried to run through that very, very quickly. I'll stop there and hand it off to the next panelist.
Yeah, no, you've done a great job, Greg. I think you've set the table really nicely for the rest of our panel. Lots of crunchy bits you have highlighted. So if I can, I'm going to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Hussein Shamji, who represents the Alberta Utilities Commission. Hussein, just by way of introduction, is an engineering specialist with more than a decade in production operations engineering, upstream pipeline integrity management, and technical services within the oil and gas industry. He's currently within the gas utilities division, where he leads the review and evaluation of gas utility facility applications. I'll flag as well in his introduction the reason that we've asked Hussein to join us today, of course, is because the province had asked the Alberta Utilities Commission to do an inquiry into matters related to hydrogen blending to understand better some of the complexity within the value chain around how hydrogen should be provided, around who should pay, around how to deploy it outside of your major metropolitan areas. And so that process really was very consequential in helping to identify some of the most important questions that needed to be addressed before any kind of legislative changes could be made. So, Hussein, I'm going to turn things over to you now.
Thanks, Barb. So today I'll give you a really high-level summary of the AUC's Hydrogen Inquiry Report. As Barb mentioned, this was a major step in shaping Alberta's energy future. And so my summary will focus on 4 key points: what was done, why it was done, where it will be done, and the overall outcome. So what was done? In March 2022, the Government of Alberta directed the AUC to examine the feasibility of blending hydrogen into natural gas distribution systems. And so the Commission launched the inquiry by issuing a public notice and Bulletin 2022-05, which outlined the scope of the review and included a comment matrix to guide stakeholder submissions. This ensured transparency and structured feedback. They invited input from a broad range of stakeholders, including natural gas distribution companies like ATCO and Apex, hydrogen producers, municipalities and gas cooperatives, consumer advocacy groups, and industry associations and technical experts. In addition, the Commission engaged Universal Pegasus International to prepare a technical report on hydrogen blending. Stakeholders were given the opportunity to comment on that report, and Universal Pegasus responded to those comments. This process provided a comprehensive evidence base for the Commission's findings. So why was it done? This inquiry supports Alberta's hydrogen roadmap, which positions hydrogen as a potential cornerstone of our low-carbon energy future. Alberta is already Canada's largest hydrogen producer, and blending hydrogen into natural gas is seen as an early step toward decarbonizing the natural gas distribution grid. Why blending? Because it leverages existing infrastructure. It minimizes upfront costs and creates demand for hydrogen while providing learning opportunities for future pure hydrogen networks. The ultimate goal here is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 14 million tons, and this could be introduced by, or these emissions could be cut by 14 million tons by blending hydrogen into natural gas streams, and this can be done by 2030, which is about 5% of our 2019 emissions. So where hydrogen will be blended? Hydrogen blending would start in low pressure natural gas distribution systems, not high pressure transmission pipelines. These natural gas distribution systems deliver gas to homes and businesses for heating and hot water. The initial focus would be on urban municipal systems, such as those operated by ATCO and Apex, because they have centralized infrastructure and higher population densities. Blending in rural systems is considered impractical at this stage due to multiple gate stations, lower demand, and higher costs. So early pilot projects will likely occur in cities and towns near hydrogen production hubs, such as the Edmonton region and Fort Saskatchewan, where ATCO has already begun blending trials. The overall outcome of the hydrogen inquiry. So the Commission's findings can be grouped into 7 key areas: legislative clarity, safety first, blending thresholds, phased implementation, roles and responsibilities, cost and policy, and future study. For legislative clarity, the outcome of the inquiry was to amend the definition of gas in the Gas Utilities Act and the Gas Distribution Act to include hydrogen blends up to 20% by volume. This simple change removes a major barrier and enables pilot projects. The second outcome, safety first, safety and reliability are paramount. I'm going to say that again. Safety and reliability are paramount. Mandatory engineering assessments are required before blending occurs. Pipeline design must be in accordance with CSA Z662 and ASME B3112 codes, as there's currently no specific Canadian standard for hydrogen. Hydrogen is 14 times lighter than air at standard conditions and has a much wider flammable range than natural gas, so public education campaigns are recommended to build trust and awareness. Blending thresholds. A cautious approach is advised. The maximum threshold should be 20% hydrogen by volume, but pilot projects should start at lower levels, such as 5% or less, to validate safety and performance. The fourth finding, phased implementation, the outcome was it should focus on urban systems first. Rural blending is not practical initially due to infrastructure complexity and cost. The fifth outcome, roles and responsibilities. Distribution utilities should manage blending and recover related costs through regulated rates. Hydrogen production and procurement should evolve in competitive markets similar to natural gas today. On the regulatory side, given rural utilities is the technical regulator for distribution pipelines, there is potential for overlapping responsibilities. As such, consideration should be given to a single agency assuming responsibility for the technical and rate regulation. Number 6, cost and policy. Hydrogen blending will increase costs. Government support, such as subsidies, rebates, or tax credits, may be needed to protect affordability and achieve emissions targets. And finally, 7, future study. Application compatibility, cost allocation for different hydrogen types, and lessons from other jurisdictions require further research. Pilot projects will be critical for gathering real-world data. So in summary, hydrogen blending is technically feasible and aligns with Alberta's decarbonization goals, but it must proceed gradually with strong safety standards, clear legislation, and supportive policies to manage costs and public acceptance. Thank you. Back to you, Barb.
Thank you very much, Hussein. That was a fantastic overview. And I would say that what was clear in both the engagement sessions that the Department of Energy did, as well as certainly through the inquiry itself, there was an overriding message that was given, which was you need to go low and go slow in terms of proving out concept. And I think the Alberta Utilities Commission is to be commended for really unpacking a difficult value chain to understand those nuances and complexity, particularly given, obviously, as a regulator, you take policy direction from the province. So much of the next steps with respect to establishing that regulatory regime for the blending market really has to come from the province of Alberta. So we're going to move on now to our third speaker, who comes to us from British Columbia and Fortis, BC. I'm delighted to introduce Tyler Dickinson, who is Renewable Gas Supply Engineer with Fortis, BC. He works in the hydrogen business development area, where he drives techno-economic analyses, demonstration projects, system-wide technological feasibility studies, and business opportunities for hydrogen projects as part of the utility's emerging hydrogen portfolio. Fantastic. Our neighbors to the west are making some great strides in this area. Tyler also collaborates with universities and industry to develop and implement cutting-edge hydrogen technology solutions through research initiatives and pilot projects. So I'm going to turn things over to you now, Tyler.
Thank you very much. If I knew that was going to be read, I probably would have provided a more humble bio. So Fortis, BC, we are the primary natural gas utility in the province here. So our group, the Renewable Gas Group, we have two main parts. We have the RNG group. They're pretty well known. They do projects that they build, they operate, they work with different industry partners. And we are trying to do something similar here with the hydrogen focus. So What we're looking at is how do we do that? And to start, we need to do system-wide feasibility work. So we are in the process of doing a multi-year feasibility assessment of our system. So right now we're focusing on the distribution and the intermediate pipe segment of the system. And then future parts of that study will look at the transmission system. So because of where we get our gas from, Alberta, we need to look at the possibility what happens if Alberta blends and sends hydrogen blended gas to BC. And what are the downstream impacts of that? We are in the process of looking at some residential commercial blending pilots as well. We have one project that we're looking at here at our Surrey operations building where we're tentatively going to be blending some hydrogen into one of our own buildings. So that is quite exciting. On the transportation side, we have a low carbon transportation group as well. They recently just launched a collaboration with Loblaws. So quite a big project partner there. They're looking at Class 8 trucks, and the beauty of Class 8 trucks is they use a lot of hydrogen. One tank of for a Class 8 truck takes about 60 kilograms of hydrogen, and that is a way that we can see that we can accelerate adoption of hydrogen through the province. Another segment that we can unlock potentially in the future is marine rail aviation. We have a big airport here, and we also have access to a lot of deep water ports. So we see that as a segment that might enable some hydrogen activity as well. Probably should have put this further up, but there's three pathways that we're looking at. Pyrolysis is one that we're looking at really in detail right now. That's the process of natural gas getting split into solid carbon and hydrogen. The benefit of that is that we don't have a lot of geology in BC that would enable sequestration of CO2 as you do in Alberta. So that would enable us to create hydrogen and not have to deal with a CO2 byproduct. SMR, it works better at larger scales and those larger scales happen to be in Alberta, I think. So we're not focusing too much on that. And then electrolytic, the process of splitting water using electricity into hydrogen and oxygen. The economics of electrolytic processes seem to be high. So we are looking at pyrolysis in the future. Next slide. This is the meat of why we're here to talk today. So in BC, we have what we call the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Regulation. Essentially, it's an enabling policy. It lets us, if we can meet a price cap, which is about $5 a kilogram of hydrogen, and a carbon intensity cap, we are enabled to go ahead and start building out these projects. I think the challenge that we're seeing is that $5 a kilogram for hydrogen is a really tight price cap. So we are working on several different models and technical feasibilities and cost of service models, but it's the $5 per kilogram mark is challenging to hit. And we also have the emerging, so the BC Energy Regulator has just gotten involved in regulating some of the activities in the province. They have a new hydrogen facilities regulation that concerns the production, equipment, and storage. So they are looking at regulating that in the future, actually effective April. Next slide. And I think there's two main pieces that we need to look at here. There's the policy piece, obviously policy enables, but there's also the technical piece. So the government has issued a standards and codes roadmap here. Hopefully to look at breaking down some of those technical barriers that we see. I think working with universities is one way that we can start to break down those barriers. CSA, I know, is looking at potentially increasing the allowable concentration of hydrogen in end-use appliances, but that's still a work in progress. And yeah, I think the message is it's a combination of technical and policy that's going to enable hydrogen blending in the future. And that's all for me.
Fantastic job, Tyler. I think what impresses me is BC has made some tremendous strides in terms of setting up its own hydrogen system. And if we know anything here in Alberta, it's around the complexity of that system. So I think you've got some great critical enabling statutes in place that would be good opportunity for us to learn here in Alberta. So we've got one more speaker, and then we're going to go to our Q&A session. I'm going to pass the talking stick over to Mr. Mike Ashton from Linde. Mike is Associate Director of Global Government Affairs at Linde. He's more than 20 years experience in the energy industry, developing policy, either as a government official or as a government affairs representative. He's been in that role since 2021, and certainly has Linde has brought some fantastic news here in Alberta with respect to the blue hydrogen plant as part and parcel of the net zero cracker that Dow is bringing forward. So Mike is joining us from sunny and warm Houston, Texas. Over to you now, Mike.
Thanks, Barbara. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the introduction. Just give you a little bit more overview of Linde. Linde is a global industrial gas company. Produces gases such as oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen, and also provides engineering solutions for those gas production and processing. The company has a wide range of industries that we service, such as healthcare, electronics, chemicals, and energy, offering products and technologies that help consumers to improve their decarbonization goals, efficiency, such as the production of clean hydrogen. Linde's been operating in Canada for over 100 years, and Canada remains to be one of our locations where we see a lot of potential growth, a lot of opportunity for technology development, innovation strategies. And we really want to see that partnership, especially grow in advancing decarbonization and clean technologies. And as Barbie mentioned, recently Linde has announced the investment of over a $2 billion project to build, own, and operate a clean hydrogen facility in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. The facility will supply Dow's Fort Saskatchewan Path to Zero project, the world's first net zero ethylene cracker manufacturing facility. But we also plan to serve the broader Alberta market as well. Linde's this decarbonization facility will be the largest clean hydrogen production facility in Canada and one of the largest in the world. And this will be one of the largest investments that Linde will be moving forward in our corporate history. So we're really excited about this opportunity. And construction's already begun, and we're looking to start up in the next few years. And as we know, I mean, really, the cost of hydrogen, what's the difference between today and way back when it's always been talked about as the fuel of the future. One thing that we're really excited about is this opportunity to build it at scale. We're seeing a lot of our customers looking for it, such as Dow, so that we have the opportunity to build these large central plants at greater efficiency than these small distribution systems that kind of feed around that area. So as I mentioned, we're producing with this Fort Saskatchewan Clean Hydrogen Project, 90% of the hydrogen for Dow, reserving an extra 10% to facilitate a hydrogen economy. And that's kind of really what Linde is trying to do, is how do we build out hydrogen today? How do we make it into actual an economy and use of scale where the cost is not prohibitive? And the first thing we got to start of is large scale production. And that kind of begins to have a discussion around blending. Even a small percentage of blending has a great potential to grow a market. And so at Linde, we see hydrogen blending into the natural gas pipeline infrastructure can help accelerate the transition towards the use of clean hydrogen as a fuel and energy storage medium. In Germany, for the last 3 years, Linde has developed the world's first plant for extracting hydrogen from the natural gas pipeline. At this facility, we're blending a various concentration of hydrogen to natural gas to test the proof of concept, to demonstrate hydrogen blending can work in real life conditions. This is an ongoing pilot project, but we're looking to kind of commercialize this and look for that opportunity as well. We, again, are really looking at blending as an opportunity to grow the hydrogen economy, and this is for 3 reasons. One is hydrogen blending creates a robust market for hydrogen by ensuring an offtake for large-scale hydrogen production, as well as for regional hydrogen hub projects, et cetera. Next is the overcoming a number of financing challenges. A key foundation for hydrogen blending is to create a business case that allows these projects to attract investment. And last, I would say the great thing with blending is that it requires a partnership that we need to have with the public sector. So by recognizing this potential, policymakers are sending that message to investors and companies that they're willing to support a hydrogen economy into the future. And I think that's really important as well as we kind of look at this policy. And Alberta's taken the right steps, but we do feel like there's some gaps, some opportunities that we continue to look at as we grow that opportunity of hydrogen blending. So with that, Barbara, I'll turn it back over to you.
That's great. And I have to say this hydrogen blending and deblending pilot that you guys have been working on for the last 3 years really could be a game changer. Obviously, we're focusing on the distribution system, but big opportunities on that high pressure transmission system. Still have a long way to go in that space, but we understood from the beginning that it was going to be technology solutions that were going to be consequential to the overall value chain, and fantastic that Lindy is leading in this space. So it is now 12:46. We've got 30 minutes left, and we're going to move now to our Q&A. What I'm going to suggest that we do is we'll spend about 15 minutes in our panel discussion, my facilitated Q&A, and then we're going to turn things over to our audience. So roughly 15 minutes with some questions and answers from me and the panelists, and then we'll open things up to our audience. So put your thinking caps on and button yourself down here, because I think we're going to get real excited and dig into some of the complexity that we understand still thwarts the value chain. And my first question, if I could, is going to go to you, Greg. You've had hopefully an opportunity to take a few sips of water or coffee and get your talking voice back. Greg, what are you seeing as a utility as being the major hurdles for a low-cost hydrogen producer for injecting into the ATCO system based on what we know today on Bill 52? What are some of the major hurdles that you're seeing?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. The first one I would say is policy uncertainty. When we started this work, we had a consumer carbon tax. For example, the consumer carbon tax was sort of pivotal in the economic justification of the work, and also the mechanism, like utilities were being told effectively, if you do nothing, you're going to have quite expensive gas by 2030. And so, go find some alternatives. And that consumer carbon tax no longer exists in Canada. The second thing that's happened, and like Mike might even be better to talk to this, but there's been a lot of noise around industrial carbon taxes in Canada and what the price will be, and even the tier system today. Like if you go buy tier credits, you can get them for like $20 a ton. I think that makes production of low carbon hydrogen challenging. It makes the business case challenging if you don't have trust that the credit value will be somewhere near the posted price of what carbon is. And so that could also increase the price of hydrogen on the end user. Now, this also impacts renewable energy, impacts everyone. And the MOU the province just signed with the feds makes some pretty big commitments around tier. But we'll have to wait and see how that comes out. In the coming months. I think they have till April to solve that. And then finally, with Bill 52 specifically, there's that financial piece of who pays. I can't think of another example in Alberta, at least, where you have that direct, like if someone requests something, they pay for 100% of all the costs, including the energy. The energy is one thing, but like we're talking about the blending station, everything else in between, and that's a real challenge for early adopters. So if you're not right beside where the hydrogen source is, I think it very quickly can make it challenging economically. So I will qualify that with saying the regs aren't written. So there may be more flexibility than the bill suggests, but if you read it on face value, it kind of suggests like, hey, you can have hydrogen blended gas, but you as in the community are likely going to pay for most of those costs. And if we take it to electricity, which obviously our business deals in quite a bit, like folks can purchase renewable electricity, but they don't pay all the costs of connecting that solar farm to the electric grid and the transmission and all the the substations and everything else that's needed to do that. That's shared amongst all ratepayers in Alberta, and that's why we have renewable energy. If the if the folks requesting that renewable energy had to pay all those costs, I think it's fair to say we would not have the renewable energy market we have. And so I'm just trying to give that as an example of that's a challenge. And I know the government's not here to speak to their thinking behind this, but I think the intent is to really protect affordability, and I want to recognize that.
Sure. Yeah.
But I also, if you protect affordability too much, you can't do anything. So, there's that balance. So I'll stop there, and if anyone else on the panel would like to jump in, they're free
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Greg, you're kind of breaking up on my end. I don't know if it's my internet connection. Maybe I'll just test with the panelists. Can everyone hear me and see me appropriately?
Is it
We're
me?
good?
Is it me that's breaking up?
No,
It was, yeah.
Am I good now?
think you're fine.
Yep.
You're good now. I'm going to actually turn things over to you, Mike, if you have any additional comments you'd like to make on that question, or I had a question for you actually on hydrogen blending. Maybe the question would be, should hydrogen blending be regarded as a short-term measure to leverage that existing infrastructure, or does it really offer that long-term solution within the context of a broader energy transition? So
Yeah.
I'll leave it to you. You can answer, you can hop on Greg's response, or you can unpack your question.
Yeah, so just to build on what Greg said about the carbon price and the tier pricing, and that was an integral policy that drove Lindy to come and invest in Alberta. When you think about why would we pick Alberta for a clean hydrogen facility, the tier structure and putting a price on carbon is instrumental in that, because it does drive that incentive for decarbonization. And we want to see that robust market to continue, because honestly, climate change is going to come with the cost, and how are we going to deal with that cost to decarbonize? And the more of the policies that we have in place, such as tier or market systems to decarbonize, the better. I feel like the easier it is to make these investments because of that opportunity. And we need that market to continue to be robust. And as Greg says, we're optimistic. And with the recent MOU, we'll see over the next few months how that looks in Canada, particularly. And in the US, we're seeing that kind of with the new Trump administration, we're seeing that soften. We're seeing a lot of that incentives for decarbonization soften. So I think there's an opportunity for Canada to really step up and look for that opportunity. And that's the kind of way Lindy's looking at it from a global perspective as well. To shift this briefly to talk about your point about, is this a short term or long term? I do feel like there's a lot of thought that, oh, this is just a short term, blend is a short term, and then it's not going to have a really long term solutions. But I do want to say, I think there's opportunities in the long term for blending. Obviously, in the short term, it's a great to facilitate demand for opportunity for technology and new hydrogen technologies, etc. But long term, I do feel like there's opportunities as new innovations get created. We have existing infrastructure. If we can blend within that infrastructure of natural gas and then extract out the hydrogen as needed, I see a lot of opportunity in the long run as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. That was very well done. I'm going to turn things over now to you, Hussein. What mechanisms, from an AUC perspective, what mechanisms are required to ensure that transparency in rate impacts for customers receiving that blended gas? Any thoughts on that, Hussein?
So I guess the question is how are we ensuring that it's transparent?
Yes.
Yeah, so the AUC's mandate is to ensure that we are delivering, or we ensure the delivery of utilities to Albertans, to ratepayers, in a way that is fair, responsible, transparent, and in the public interest. So in that regard, we're just that is our mandate, and I guess we'll just have to go from there. We're in touch with the governments in terms of the policy that they're providing, and yeah, our process is about transparency.
Do you feel then that your current mandate is sufficient to address hydrogen blending policy, or do you see a need for changes to your mandate?
I believe our mandate is sufficient to address it. That being said, we don't really consider projects from a climate change policy perspective or a greenhouse gas emissions reduction perspective. It's more about balancing the interests of utilities with public interest.
Yeah, got you. Thank you for that. Tyler, you've been quiet. I'm going to turn one over to you now. Can you maybe share for us what specific technical challenges or any regulatory hurdles perhaps that FortisBC has encountered in your pilots? Maybe how have you planned for these challenges as you transition away from kind of feasibility studies to that more full-scale implementation?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the BCER energy regulator just announced their new hydrogen facilities and regulation. So because that's a nascent set of regulations, we're working with them actively to just understand what's required of us when we go through the process of doing a full-scale project, but also to make sure that these regulations are realistic and attainable, right? So make sure that if we're required to let's say notify them every time we do some maintenance on a demonstration project, if is that realistic when maybe we're tweaking things just to start. And that being said, we are enabled, right? We have the greenhouse gas reduction regulation, and the biggest challenge there is really getting the costs down of the hydrogen. So we're working with OEMs and equipment providers and just working on the technical side of things, because the closer we get to a commercial scale product for all these different types of hydrogen production, the further we can bring that cost down, then we can hit that regulation, right? So almost like a cost driver that's driving technology innovation. So that's what we're working on.
Has FortisBC gone forward with any kind of a broad awareness building campaign with the public to kind of convey what you're doing specific to hydrogen or the merits of hydrogen blend, things of that nature?
I think it's in the works. I don't know how much I can say on that, but it's in the works. And I think just looking at different jurisdictions, like in California, where they've already gone through the steps of engaging the regulators, because it's an early technology, and sometimes people can get nervous about that. It's the engagement early on is really important, and just the public awareness and just putting people's minds at ease, because it is a utility that we're working with. It is paramount that we maintain safety, as Hussein said. So we were working on that.
I'm going to do a lightning question before we open up things to our audience. And I'm going to ask each of you to maybe in a very succinct way respond to this question. What, from the perspective of your organization, do you think is the most important policy gap or barrier that needs to be clarified through the Bill 52 regulation? And I'm going to start, if I can, with Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Barb. What I think is really important is what I don't see is that percentage of what the blending will be. And I really kind of want to, I feel like we kind of need to put that in mindset of, okay, what kind of demand are we looking at? What's the government willing to support? I think that will help facilitate some investment. So I'd like to kind of see that addressed.
Thank you. Hussein. What's the most important policy gap or barrier that needs to be clarified through the reg?
Yeah, I think also the blending percentages, I think that might need to be tightened up a bit, but also part of the AUC's mandate is affordability, right? We are under the Ministry of Affordability and Utilities, so figuring out the impact to ratepayers I think is consequential here, and just figuring out how that works.
Yeah, perfect. Tyler, over to you.
Unfortunately, I'm not a registered lobbyist, so I can't comment on regulations, but I trust the three of you to do the best.
Okay, thank you. Didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable on that. Greg, so you get the last point on this one before we're going to open things up to our audience.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it would be that the cost recovery, just broadly, the cost recovery mechanisms, how that's supposed to work is really cloudy still. And we've made significant investments in our pilot projects without any cost recovery on those. And, just remains this kind of uncertainty around how hydrogen projects would be treated. And I'm respecting Hussein's here, and like he doesn't know either because we haven't tested it. And I think the lack of clarity there is challenging. So that would be for us the biggest one.
Perfect. Okay, panelists, put your super thinking caps on now. We're going to open up the session now for our audience questions. I'm kind of just randomly going to go and lift up some of these questions, hoping that we'll get to as many of them as possible over the next probably 10-15 minutes. So the first question that we have is specific to the gas distribution system. So given that the gas distribution infrastructure varies in terms of age and material specifications across provinces, what key lessons from Alberta's material capability assessments do you believe could serve as best practices for other jurisdictions considering hydrogen blending? So don't know who wants to take that one.
I'll start, and then maybe Tyler can jump in, and we're probably the only two that can address this. When you do a blending project, you need to do a quantitative risk assessment before you do that project to look at those things. And I would say you'd have to be very careful to not actually take key lessons from one project and apply it to another, because every system's different. Broadly, though, and I will say this broadly, we have high hydrogen blends all over the world in distribution systems. The issue is generally from a safety perspective or an operations perspective is not the pipelines or the fittings or the valves or the meters. The issue will be the end use appliances. So, like I said, we are delivering hydrogen in all of our pipes today in small amounts because it's naturally there. The work we've done, and again, the pressures we're talking about here, a distribution pressure, there's no real negative impact on the infrastructure. I say generally because someone could probably find an exception to that, but but I would say you got to be careful. You have to be careful not to generalize on these things and look at each project independently. So I'll hand it off to Tyler, whoever else wants to jump in.
Fair enough, Tyler. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why we've done our system-wide feasibility. And when I say system-wide, it sounds high level, but we've gone down to analyzing individual fittings and pipe components and just looking at general material compatibility. And so we fully map out our system just, if in the event that we go and look at a project is understood. And then if we ever went to go pursue a project in a specific community, we would have a decent understanding, right? And that being said, the end use appliances, if they're older, we don't know how the compatibility would look, but from the research we've done, it seems like most appliances are completely compatible with hydrogen blends to a certain percentage. So, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Can I jump in on one
Go
more
ahead.
thing, Barb?
Yeah,
Like
go ahead.
even when we talk about the percentage, like I always say to people, like the percentage is can be misleading because again, it starts with what gas are you starting with, and what is the heat value of the gas, and what's like the Wabi index and all this. So like even when we say, oh, 15% could be good, if you had really, really dry gas with a low energy content, it might not be good. Like, so again, it's I just want to be like super clear. And then when we say 15% is the limit, like I know there's systems in Alberta where you could put like 30% hydrogen in them and you would maintain that Wabi index that the appliance is designed for. I'm not saying that should be the limit, but we're getting technical here, but like you have to look at every single one of those factors when you do that quantitative risk assessment. And then to Tyler's point, like if you have an older system with really old appliances, now appliances generally, you don't see too many appliances these days that are older than 20 years. They just the way they're built these days. I
Yeah.
think everyone knows things don't last as long as they used to. However, it's, finding that one appliance and talking to the customers and all that. So anyways, I'll just leave it there.
I'm going to pick up, this is a good question here, and I think a couple panelists, you might have some good perspectives. So this is looking at the $5 per kilogram that $5 per kilo price is challenging to make the fundamental business case work. In particular, given the cancellation of the residential carbon tax, do you see a scenario where you have carbon credits used to improve the business case for hydrogen blending? And I think maybe Greg, you and Mike might have some interesting thoughts on this one.
Do you want me to start, or Mike, did you want to start?
No, go ahead, Greg.
I feel like I've done too much talking. Yeah, I think definitely. So first off, I'll say I think we can get hydrogen cheaper than $5 a kilogram in Alberta. I don't know if Mike's willing to let on or not. He's the producer, so I think that's possible as a starting point here. And this is one of the reasons Alberta should be a leader in this. Where if you're in downtown Vancouver, like good luck getting hydrogen for less than $5 a kilogram. It's geography. It's where infrastructure exists and doesn't exist. Now the question is, will carbon credits help? I think they can, but I think ultimately, for this to work, and I'm actually going to point to Fortis's renewable gas program. Carbon credits don't make the renewable gas program go around. What makes it go around is a policy directive saying we want to reduce this much carbon by this date in the province of British Columbia. I think ultimately, if we don't have that level of commitment around this, I think we'll fail. And that's just because, and I'm not saying we need to have some broad, massive commitment here, but even if we said we want to achieve, and I'll throw a number out here, 5,000 tons of CO2 equivalent reductions by 2030 in Alberta. It's a very small number. Let's go prove this out and do it in a way that's affordable and also allows our smartest people who work on this to figure out, because the issue ultimately is the cost of the hydrogen. Like I think that is what's holding us back. And so yeah, carbon credit will help someone like Mike and his business to produce a lower cost hydrogen, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. So I'll stop there.
Mike, over to you.
Yeah, what I would add, and I agree, the carbon price will help. There's also a lot of incentive. The federal government's come out with the clean energy investment tax credits. That helps. The Alberta petrochemical incentive program, that helps. I mean, there are lots of programs lined up in Canada and Alberta, especially to facilitate the opportunity to continue to grow in clean hydrogen. And we're going to continue to look at that. What I feel from our perspective too is, as I mentioned in my opening comments, producing hydrogen at a large scale is really, really important. And historically, that has been where you need to have a large anchor customer, such as our case with Dow or other projects. So, and that's located in industrial areas. So we have a distribution question that we need to address as we continue to grow the hydrogen economy. How do we get those large scale production facilities to get clean hydrogen down to, for instance, a large a large urban area where mobility is an option, where, infrastructure for hydrogen mobility, mass transit, etc. That's an opportunity. We feel from Lindy again, the blending opportunity, the existing infrastructure with natural gas, blending opportunity with and the pipelines is an opportunity. But how do we reduce some of those distribution costs will be really important for how we also look at reducing the cost of our hydrogen.
For sure. Panelists, we've got about 5 minutes left. I really have enjoyed this conversation. I think that we've hit the nail on the head in terms of where those real crunchy inflection points are in the value chain, and highlighted how important it is to have regulatory clarity. Obviously, the hope is as that Bill 52 regulation comes forward, some of the current questions that are still yet to be answered in the Act itself will be addressed through the regulation. I'm going to suggest now actually we begin to wrap. Just want to say again a very big thank you to the four of you for agreeing to come chat about this very important matter. I appreciate that December is a very busy time for everyone, but I think the issues that have been flagged really highlight how important it is to address some of these critical questions if Alberta is going to achieve its overarching hydrogen ambition. So again, thanks to you, Greg, Hussein, Tyler, and Mike. I think it's been a fantastic session. As well, I'd like to give props to the Calgary region and Edmonton region hydrogen hubs for bringing forward this webinar topic. And last, a real shout out to Marissa for all the logistics support. I couldn't have done it without you. Just to wrap then, I'll mention that this webinar will be posted on the website calgaryhydrogen.ca next week at some point. Encourage everyone here to sign up for the next webinar, which will be on January 21st on the success Finland has found in the hydrogen ecosystem. So that should be very interesting to see what learnings can be ported over to us here in Alberta. Certainly, if you do want to chat with the hub teams in person or otherwise, don't hesitate to reach out to either Zach from Calgary or Brent from Edmonton. Please do keep your eyes peeled for the next Calgary hub event, Hub at the Pub, I believe it's called, at the end of January. So that is it for me, everyone. Thanks again. Have a wonderful Christmas break, and I'll let you go.